This is the Yunzii YZ75 and it caught my eye because of photos like this. It looks super clean in a nice bright desk setup in both colorways, and it levels up at night with full RGB, the RGB side light and the optional badge installed in place of the 4 keys on the right. Of course, looks aren't everything, and I wanted to get this keyboard in for a review to see what the build quality and functionality of the features was like, and most importantly for me to check out the typing sound and feel. If you like what you see in this video, check out the affiliate links and discount codes in the description, where you'll be able to buy this keyboard and the components at a discount price. In terms of unboxing, I bought the barebone keyboard, so obviously you get the keyboard with the plate mount stabilizers and a few of the usual extra bits and pieces. The barebone comes in 2 different colours, white and black, and will run you $65, and then you also have the fully assembled version which comes in 4 colourways and with Gateron G Pro switches to choose from, which will run you $90. You can see that the keyboard is south facing and has full per key RGB. For connectivity, this one is wireless, so it can be connected via the USB-C port for charging and the wired connection, wireless using the 2.4 GHz dongle, and with Bluetooth 5.0 which allows connection and switching between 3 devices while in Bluetooth mode. The 2.4 GHz dongle is stored quite stealthily here. The per key RGB and RGB side light can be controlled separately, have several modes, brightness adjustment, and can be switched on and off separately. So first off, we're going to do a stock build and typing test. For my build, I'm keeping it budget. I always buy keyboards as bare bones or kits where possible so as I can build to my taste, and I always do budget builds on entry level keyboards, which this is at $65 as a bare bone. On the switches, I'm going for a set of Epomaker Wisteria Linears, which are a budget but nice set of factory lubed switches. Good budget switches are easy to find as price is much less of a factor in the switch world. For the keycaps, I'm going for something a bit different and in keeping with the theme and brand of the keyboard with a set of Yunzii Starry Perm Zodiac keycaps. These are a budget set of cherry profile die sublimated PBT keycaps, which is fine as this is a south facing PCB. Let's listen to the stock typing test. Based on the stock typing test, it sounds and feels like you could get away with just sorting the stabilizers as they are not pre-lubed, but this depends on how fussy you are. For me, I can hear that cheaper, more hollow sound, which is largely reduced by the tape and PE foam mods. We have plate foam and case dampening stock in the keyboard, but for me with these plastic entry-level keyboards, the more you can sound dampen the better. The case, plate and PCB is never going to create a very nice sound. I prefer the denser sound created by the tape and dampening on these keyboards, which should bring the sound and feel more in line with the nice and clean look. So in terms of the mods, I'm going to be doing a full disassembly, I'll be tape modding, I'll be PE foam modding, and I'll be sorting the stabilizers out. Disassembly of this one is okay, but nowhere near as straightforward and risk-free as some of the other entry-level keyboards. There are no screws owing to the mount style, but the keyboard is clipped together, which is never as nice as just removing screws to disassemble. So first we need to unclip the top case from the bottom case. I found the easiest way to do this was by forcing a gap between the top and bottom case using your fingers, then pushing a plastic lever into the gap. I always use plastic car trim levers for this. The idea is that your levers should be made of a softer material than the case itself, so as you damage and mark the levers before you damage or mark the case. After working the lever all the way around between the top and bottom cases, you can remove the top case and get at the good stuff inside. As you can see here, there are no screws to undo to get the plate and PCB assembly out of the bottom case. This is because it isn't a tray mount. This one is probably considered a sandwich mount, but it's more like a cross between a sandwich and stack mount, as the case clipping together actually forces the PCB down into the case dampening pad, but we'll come on to that shortly. So next we need to lift out the plate and PCB assembly and unplug the PCB from the battery. From here we need to unscrew the screws from under the PCB holding the plate and PCB together, then we can separate the plate, the PCB and the plate dampening. Finally, we remove the plate mount stabilizers from the plate, and that's it stripped for modding. Before we get into the mods, I do want to comment on the build quality and the mount. The case is your stereotypical entry-level plastic case. I think it's ABS and it's very thin, so isn't really anything to write home about, but is also what you'd expect at this price point. Most important with entry-level keyboards is how they look and feel when assembled. The plate is aluminium and badly coated in matte paint, which you often see and which I don't like, as you can't help but mark it while pulling the switches with a metal switch puller. The PCB is fine, not much to say on quality, but features wise it's really good, as it's a wireless keyboard and has perky RGB, as well as RGB on the outside edge of the bottom PCB for the sidebar. The mount style itself is where I find myself a little bit disappointed and confused, to be honest. The PCB lands off on the case dampening before it hits the land off points on the posts in the bottom case, and because of the feet contours and other items in the bottom case, it seems impossible that the PCB lands off in any kind of uniformed way or with any even pressure from underneath. For me, if you're going to rely on the PCB landing on the case dampening like a stack mount, it needs to land off with some consistency, or you should just tray mount it. With the mount being as it is and without being able to find any consistency in where the PCB lands off, I decided to cut the dampening where the USB dongle is housed, as the PCB was definitely landing here before anywhere else. Then I placed O-rings on the posts where the PCB could potentially land when the case is clipped together. I would have O-ring mounted it, but I couldn't even get the PCB to land off evenly without the dampening pad in there. Now we can move on to the mods. First I tried the Holy mod on the spacebar stabilizer, but realised that the tolerance between the wire and the stem was actually really tight, so all the stabilizers need is lubing on the outside of the stems and inside of the housings with Krytox 205 grade 0, then dielectric grease on the wires where they insert into the stem and also in the clips on the housings. Next I applied the PE foam mod. On most builds I just use PE foam sheets or bags to cover the entire PCB instead of using the stick-on pads that you can get. You just need to remember to cut under the stabilizer housings where the stems get close to the PCB so you don't hear and feel the foam. Then later you need to cut slits for the big center pins on the switches. This mod reduces the hollow sound you get on some keyboards and produces the creamy sound profile that is quite popular in the hobby. With that done, we can reassemble the plate and PCB, not forgetting the plate dampening pad and ensuring the PE foam stays positioned correctly on the PCB. Once the plate and PCB is back together, we're going to do a 3-layer tape mod, which is just layers of masking tape on the bottom of the PCB. This further reduces the hollow sound and is especially useful in changing the sound on keyboards with flex cuts in the PCB. Even though this doesn't have flex cuts, it will make a difference. Once the tape is on, we need to cut holes in the tape for the JST port and posts in the bottom case. Now we can reassemble as the mods are complete. We just plug the JST cable back into the PCB and land the plate and PCB assembly back in the bottom case. Next we clip the top and bottom cases together, making sure it seats evenly with all the clips secured. When you add tape or dampening, you want to check this, as you can end up placing too much material in there which will affect how it clips together. Now we just need to cut those slits for the center pins on the switches, install the switches, then install the keycaps. And we're ready for the modded typing test. So off the back of the modded typing test, I can tell you it was well worth the work to mod the keyboard, which only takes an hour or two with no switches to lube. You can hear the improvement on the stabilizers more than on the alphas on this video, but I can assure you it sounds and feels much nicer across the whole keyboard. With that in mind, let's finish up on my thoughts on the Yunzii YZ75. Budget and entry level keyboards are all about the mods for me. As a keyboard enthusiast, stock entry level keyboards that cost as little as this one are rarely good enough when stocked for me to actually want to use them over my other keyboards. In my opinion, they need modding and benefit more from modding than most intermediate and premium keyboards. In my opinion, the Keychron V series keyboards end up nicer in terms of the typing sound and feel, mainly because of the case and plate material quality and the consistency given by the tray mount. You can apply the same mods to the V series as I did on this one, but you can also do the O-ring mod if you want to, which results in a nicer sound and feel. However, the aesthetic of this keyboard is different and will be preferred by some. That clean look in daylight and well lit look in the dark is something you don't get with several other entry level keyboards, and of course this has wireless, which the Keychron V series and several others don't. On the balance of things, I will always go for typing sound and feel above all else, so there are others I would go for at this price point. But if this sort of aesthetic and wireless connectivity is important to you at this price point, then I do think this is a solid choice. I hope this helps you make your decision in terms of buying this keyboard, and I'll catch you in the next one.